the seventh inning stretch, right here on VSN. Now to your hosts, Logan Stone and Josh Edwards.
Well, hello everyone, and look at that. That's a new one. That's pretty nice. I like it. Thanks, Brandon. Brandon, you muted yourself. Oh wait, no, you didn't.
No,
Thanks for making that, CEO. We have a full house today, and it's like the OG crew plus one. It's Brandon Saffel, CEO of Variety Sports Network. He came on the show once or twice, and Josh Edwards has decided to grace us with his presence. It's been once or twice. Anyways, Josh, how are you doing? Edwards.
I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, just another day, another dollar. Keeping up on the all the signings today.
Yeah, we just got a big one. Mitch Haniger going to Josh Lewis's St. Louis Giants for 3 years. Let's talk about that real quick. Josh, are you excited about that?
I am excited about it. I'm more excited about it because it sounds like they're not it's not taking them out of the running for Judge still. So
it should.
If we can swing Haniger and Judge, that's awesome.
It's a new look at your outfield right there.
Mo's gonna pull something off. Oh, I believe in Mo. We believe in Mo. We believe in Mo.
I really don't want that. But I do want to ask you. So I don't know if you follow John Heyman on Twitter, but did you see his tweet right when it happened? And did you cry a little bit whenever he retracted it?
So I almost commented, I'm like, who's this arson judge that we're talking about? Like, I don't know of any free agent, but and somebody already updated Aaron Judge's Wikipedia page to add that to his nicknames, which I thought was awesome. But no, I wasn't super loud. I don't follow him on Twitter. I follow some other guys that would repost his stuff, but because I think he's kind of hit or miss. And so I was kind of with Logan Webb. Logan Webb posted, he's like, man, not cool.
Yeah, right.
And I think Logan Webb spoke for all of us.
Yeah, that's a heck of a way to find out Aaron Judge is not coming. Or at least, well, not yet, at least.
Not yet.
But
not yet. We'll see. From what I saw earlier this week, he's supposed to make an announcement tomorrow, is what he was leaning towards. But we'll see.
Really? Still have hope that the Mariners are going to pull one out. Sorry. I know that you're a Giants fan, but still.
No,
anyways, we have Josh Lewis here. If you don't know him, we've had him on the past couple weeks. He does the Caught in the Pickle podcast that I've, found a couple. Well, actually, you texted me about it once and invited me to your Caught in the Pickle group, which is also a really fun group to just talk about, old school, new school. Seems like there's a lot of new school guys in there and not really a lot of old school because the old school guys don't know how to work a computer. And so anyways, I started listening to it, and I know I say this all the time, and it probably sounds like a really douchey thing, but I mean this is like the biggest compliment. Like
I take it as such. I know what you're going to say, and I take it as such.
Yeah, like when you told me, like, oh yeah, it's going to be old school versus new school, and we're just going to talk about certain like things that I'm like, how can you make a podcast about it? And then I listened to the first episode, and I was just hooked. I loved how you talked about how Ted Williams was really kind of the first person to, get the shift. And I was like, oh, that's really cool to hear. And so I've religiously listened to your podcast. Really, I want to know, like, what made you think, like, old school versus new school? Like, what made you think I need to start a podcast about that?
So it started just from my own experience, honestly. Like, I always kind of joke that I am a baseball millennial. And not only because of my age, but also just because of when I grew up in the game. So I grew up playing, I grew up coaching. I went all the way to collegiate level, and then I coach still now, and just love the game every step of the way. And especially as a coach, and as I'm coaching my son's team now too, is the constant tension that baseball has had more over the last couple decades of like, hey, we're trying these new things, whether it's new analytics, whether it's new rules, whether like whatever it is. I'm not in the camp that thinks baseball is dying per se, but it definitely is suffering a little bit. And so just that, and a lot of it is that tension of kind of the old school crowd and the new school crowd and those conflicting ideas and how they're everybody seems to think that they're diametrically opposed when in reality, like there's some great arguments to both sides and points on both sides that if we could find some common ground, it would really, really help the game and grow the game better. And so I kind of in every conversation I'm in, I am that. I'm kind of both sides. And in terms of the way I was brought up very traditional, very old school, had a lot of kind of old school minded coaches, played on a lot of teams that were kind of wired that way. I mean, we had bunting drills and all that sort of stuff in when I was playing. And now I'm fascinated by numbers. I'm fascinated by analytics. I mean, I'm kind of a numbers nerd, and so that all that plays into it too. And so I've kind of found myself caught in between these two um, schools of thought, and I'm like, well, we really need to just bring them together. And that's like my wife was the one who kind of pushed me a little bit, like, hey, you should talk about this more, and should really, because I had a previous podcast and it was not in the baseball realm. And she's like, I was actually mad at you that you weren't talking about baseball.
Yeah, right.
So she's like, this is your first love, your first passion. Like, this is what you love to do. And other than my wife, it's the only thing that makes my eyes light up. Like, my personality changes when I'm around the game. And so it just kind of flowed from that and really took off. Kudos to my brother for coming up with the name. I did not come up with that. That was my brother who came up with Caught in a Pickle, because you're caught between these two bases,
Yeah.
old school and new school. And we love the movie The Sandlot. And so that's where it came from, was just, he's like, dude, it's like you're caught in a pickle. I'm like, that's brilliant. And so that's kind of where that came from.
That's really cool. So like you talk about analytics, and like that's a big part of the new age of baseball. And I mean, obviously, I'm a big analytics guy. I kind of have turned Josh onto analytics. He loves analytics now. It's his favorite thing in the world. Okay, maybe not that, uh, but I think a lot of the old school, like what I've run into, is that a lot of the old school people. Yes, Brandon, with your hands raised.
I didn't want to interrupt.
It's fine.
We're not connected to Facebook, so I'm gonna try to edit it really quick. I don't think it'll kick us out. It shouldn't kick us out.
It won't. You'll be able to edit.
Okay, I just making sure. Continue.
Okay.
Producer problem over there.
Okay then. Anyways, so what I found that whatever I run into with the old school fans is that they think analytics is this. It tells you what you should do. It tells you, and to an extent it does, but I think they don't realize that analytics is on base percentage, OPS plus, WRC plus, and I think it is able to tell you how good a player is.
Mm-hmm.
Without having to, like, because before they looked at batting average, they looked at strikeouts, they looked at home runs and RBIs. And if you didn't have over 100 RBIs, oh, you're not that great of a player. Mm-hmm. Or if you didn't have over 30 home runs, oh, you're not that great of a player. And it seems like no matter how you try to explain to them, they refuse to understand, it's not that. I mean, it is a big part of the game now, but it's not like you can like analytics to that extent, and they just won't hear anything about it. What has been your kind of experience with that?
Yeah, I think it cuts both ways a little bit too, though. I think that on the flip side of that, you've got the new school guys where it's like, if you can't put it on a spreadsheet, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so I think there's extremes to both sides. However, yes, baseball is a traditional sport. I mean, it's over 100 years old. I mean, it has this long history, and so I think that it is kind of like it has that issue, I guess, of these guys don't want to come out of the historical context of the game, right? And so they don't want to adjust their numbers. They don't want to adjust because then it's somehow tampering with their sense of history a little bit. And so I don't understand that thinking necessarily, but on the flip side of it, the argument that I've had a little bit more luck with, let's say, is the idea of simplicity. Like most of the old school guys they want to keep things simple, right? They don't want all these extra numbers and extra analytics and extra stats. And so I'm like, well, look, like analytics, especially early on, there's definitely a lot of overkill with analytics now, but early on, the goal was to bring things down and simplify things, hopefully basically into one number, to where you are looking at a player and you like, okay, they've got this score and it's taking everything, like you said, everything into account. Their hitting, their defense, their whatever X factors you can put in there. For pitchers, I mean, like you've got the stuff like spin rate and all that sort of stuff, but basically trying to boil everything down to keep things simple, stupid, like get one number to where you can compare players much more easily instead of just, oh, we've got 5 to 10 different statistics that we've got on Baseball Reference that we're trying to compare and contrast with these different players. And so when I bring up that issue of simplicity, like, hey, look, like, yes, I have much more of a traditional mindset, but the goal, at least in part of analytics, is to simplify things for you. That doesn't always work. And yes, there is a lot of debate still with analytics, but that's the goal of a lot of it. And what it's kind of started out with was to see it in the context of one number to where you could easily compare players and tell how good they were. And when you take it from that mindset, I've had a lot more, not necessarily change of heart, but at least more willingness to listen and converse.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, like, yeah, that's always been something I've been trying to preach on here. Sorry, don't mean to say preach whenever my dad's pastor, but anyways, but yeah, it's something I just don't want. Like, I feel like people would like if you could understand, just the basic numbers of like OPS, and like you don't even need to feed into the whole, Tampa Bay Rays taking Snell out in the 6th inning.
Right.
You don't need to go that far into the analytics, but if you could just understand what we're showing you, then you would be able to appreciate it. Like I saw someone talk about how the Cardinals shouldn't go after Sean Murphy because he had a 236 batting average. And I'm like, that's really not why anyone is liking it. And they refuse to like look at why the other stats. And so it just drives me insane. But I want to go back to your podcast. What was it what was the hardest part about making the podcast? I know you do a lot of research about it, which is also something that I love about it is you just do so much research on it. What is the hardest part about it?
So honestly, like I'm kind of a baseball nerd. And so like, I definitely leverage that in terms of the research and the history behind it. I also found that that's a little bit more, it brings the old school more into the show, like tapping into that history and that tradition. But the hardest part for me is sticking to the idea of that there's common ground, honestly. Because I will jump into certain things and certain topics, and I have in the show of like, no, I am 100% on this side of things, whether it's old school or new school. And it's like, how do I soften that a little bit to make the goal of the program, which is to find common ground and to grow the game and to make the game better and to approach the game from a position of love that we all have for the game. And so I do tone things down. Like it's not a very controversial or hard-lined podcast for sure. I say all the time on the show, like, hey, sometimes the answer is just both. I'm not like Stephen A. Smith, where I'm just going to take an extreme stance just for the sake of extreme stances. And so I think, but that does that actually is the hardest part for me, because I my mindset usually in life is I'm a very black and white person. And so it does grow me in the sense of, hey, there's a lot more gray area here. And that's actually improved other areas of my life, like whether it's life or parenting or politics or whatever, like whatever the case may be, there's a lot more gray in our world than we like to think there is. And so that has been the biggest challenge with the podcast, is just living in those gray areas and not necessarily going black or white right from the get-go and just taking a hardline stance. Like, hey, let's have conversations. And that's the goal of the show.
Yeah. Josh, Brandon, do you guys have any questions at the moment, or Edwards?
Well, Josh, you're a Giants fan?
I am a Giants fan by nature. Yeah.
Okay. And then what's the other half of that?
So it's a fun story. So I'm a baseball fan in general. Like, really the only team I don't like is the Dodgers. So that's kind of the only that's kind of my only beef in the sport. Like, I love watching greatness. I love watching, like, I loved the World Series this year. It was fun. I loved the Phillies and the Astros, and just seeing the different ways they play the game. And so I love the game itself at its core. And so, like, it creates more realism in my fandom. I'm not just like a Giants fan through and through in terms of, like, I'm just going to be completely unrealistic with everything having to do with the Giants. So that is the other half of that. The other half of that is I have multiple halves now. The other half of that is I grew up in Southern California. So I actually grew up about 5 to 10 minutes from Anaheim Stadium. And so I grew up, Angels were my hometown team. And so I do have a soft spot for the Angels still in my fandom. And a lot of my favorite players growing up were Angels. And it's actually a former Angel who got me to be a Giants fan. Shout out to JT Snow. Those are kind of the different elements. Like, really the only team I'll never root for is the Dodgers. Like, to me, it's more matchups. Like, oh, like, we have a running saying in our house. My kids ask me all the time, I'll have a game on or whatever, and they're like, who you rooting for in this one, Dad? And because, like, I'll pull for different teams depending on the matchups and depending on what storylines are going on and stuff like that. And so I was rooting for the Cardinals a lot this year because I just wanted to see Pujols do his thing and whatnot. And so I'm just a fan of the game in general. But yes, the Giants are my fandom. My wife and I actually had a Giants themed reception for our wedding. And so I am definitely a diehard Giants fan, but there's a lot more realism to it than just ridiculous, like, out in space type theories for the Giants. So
Fair enough.
You talk about you grew up on the Giants and the Angels. I wanted to ask you about a certain Giant, Bonds, Barry Bonds, who just I think he didn't even get 25% of the.
No, I think he got 3 votes, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
So what is your stance on Bonds? I feel like you've talked about this before in your on your podcast, but what are your thoughts on Bonds?
Yeah, I've kind of touched on it a little bit, just because he's a polarizing figure, right? So he's going to get talked about, and him being the Giant that he was, like, yeah, I'm going to touch on him sometimes, but it's I was having a conversation with somebody else in the Facebook group the other day of, like, he never tested positive while he was playing. That's one of my biggest things. Like, I struggle with the idea of the Hall of Fame and the writers and the committees or whatever other machinery they've got going on to have guys elected to the Hall of Fame. I have a hard time with them playing morality police. I don't think that that's their job. I don't think that I know some guys will take it upon themselves. So it's like, oh, we're protecting the integrity of the game. I'm like, dude, baseball's been here longer than you have. It's going to be here longer than you'll be around. Like, that's not your job. It's not your job to protect the integrity of the game. Like, the history of the game is going to dictate itself. Like, you don't need to put your thumbprint on it or whatever. And so he never tested positive while he was playing. And so to me, he is a part of history. He's part of the game. There were lots of players that were doing it. Not that that justifies it. I'm still against cheating. Like, don't get me wrong, but he never tested positive, and so everything that came out kind of after the fact and after his playing career and all that sort of stuff, the fact that he was kind of an asshole when he was playing shouldn't be really a factor. I mean, I was talking with it, like I said, I was having a conversation with somebody who was a lot more old school in their thinking in my Facebook group this week, and my whole point was like, hey, like if we're going to start playing morality police, I mean, there's racists, there's abusers, there's assholes, there's all these guys that are in the Hall of Fame that we don't even bat two eyelashes at. And so I don't think that they can play kind of the morality police. These guys, him, Clemens, Schilling, whoever it is, I mean, even to the extent of Paul Merrill, I mean, some of the guys that did test positive, I think you've got a little bit more ground to stand on. But for the people who didn't actually test positive while they were playing, I don't think you can hold them to that standard, no matter what evidence on the outside. And one of the analogies that was brought up, well, it's like, well, what about accountability, right? Like, what about holding people accountable for their choices and for doing things wrong? And I'm like, well, okay, and they used the example of robbing a bank. And I'm like, okay, first of all, apples to oranges, but like,
right.
let's not get carried away here. But yeah, you do have accountability if you rob a bank. You go to prison. Like and that is accountability. Like Barry Bonds was put on trial for perjury. I mean, like there are consequences to your actions still that are outside of baseball. And I just don't think the Hall of Fame can take that quote unquote higher road and try to play the morality card when your goal stated on your website is talking about celebrating the history of the game, and you don't have two of the greatest players in the history of the game celebrated in there. You have different records in your record book that say their names. You have different displays in your museum that have them featured. They got to be in. Like you can't have two different, like it's extremely hypocritical to have accomplishments of theirs, but then not allow them to be honored with a plaque in the Hall of Fame. So that's kind of my take on him. I do think, just personally, like I've really enjoyed Barry Bonds after retirement. I think he's softened a lot, which we see a lot of players do. I mean, Randy Johnson's another one that just like after they retire, they almost become a different person.
Yeah.
I loved the Willie Mays documentary that he was a big part of, and just hearing him tell stories about his godfather and stuff like that. I think he's softened a lot since he retired. And so personally, I like the guy a lot more, but yeah, that's a long-winded answer. Sorry, but that's kind of where I land on him. Like at the end of the day, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Is not the morality police. That's kind of where I land on it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the morality police, because I didn't even think about that aspect. Like there's like, oh, steroids is wrong, no ifs, ands, or buts. My thing about it is like, they saved baseball basically. I mean, Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, and Sammy Sosa. So the steroid era, whether you like it or not, was the best era at the best time. Because there was a time where no one thought baseball was going to live past the 90s. So that's kind of a big thing. I think he should be owed that just on that basis alone, because no one would have gone to the Hall of Fame if he didn't do what he did. Yeah. Whether or not you agree with him or not, but so yeah, I agree with that totally. Josh, I know that you probably have an opinion on this.
Well, I think I have a good compromise for it, and you and I have talked about it before. And you've already kind of mentioned part of it. The steroid era saved baseball. The McGwire Sosa challenge, quote unquote challenge of to get to 62, that re-energized and saved baseball's popularity. Bonds is a separate issue in my opinion. But I think what you do just to stabilize the whole situation and find the common ground, as Josh is always looking for, would be you put everybody in who had the numbers and had the success and had the achievements, but they have an asterisk on it, and it is a certain part of the Hall of Fame, and it's labeled the steroid era, and it's for the Bonses, the McGuires, the Sosas, the Cansecos, those guys, and that part of the Hall of Fame features those guys and what they did in that part of their career. Um, I think that's the best way to solve the problem, or at least to give these guys who saved the game their credit and their due. But that's about the only way I can think to make it work for everybody. I mean, there's always going to be the debate. I mean, long after we're gone, it's going to be touchy for a lot of people, and it's always going to be a very heated and contested argument. But hell, even I think Pete should be in, and I mean, yeah, I think Pete Rose should be in. I mean, do I like what he did? No, but I mean, he deserves to be in the Hall for his achievements as a player. What he did elsewhere, that's a different ballgame. I think he gets hosed all the time. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that because I know Josh is not one for debating, from what I can tell. So,
I'm totally for debating. I love a good debate. I want to debate with purpose. Like I always want to debate like, hey, let's come to an understanding of each other, not debate like I'm only here to prove you wrong or I'm only here to put forth my thinking and I'm not willing to listen. That's the only thing.
okay, fair enough. All right, I just didn't want to run you off.
No, you're good.
Brandon.
In regards to the Pete Rose thing, he's supposed to be the first person to make the first official bet at Cincinnati's ballpark this coming springtime.
I saw that.
love it.
Whoever thought that up is awesome.
And I hope he wins
Great
the bet,
publicity
too.
stunt.
By the way, Josh Edwards, you mentioned Jose Canseco. I believe his plaque should be in the urinal in like the farthest part of. Oh, I hate him so much. I don't know why. Well, I do. He's just a doofus. Anyways, moving on. What? Actually, Brandon, do you have a question? I know I've totally skipped on you for a little bit.
No, you're good. You can move on.
Josh, what was something that you were surprised that or at least is there something that you were surprised that the old school and the new school found, like common ground that they found with each other?
So, yeah, I don't know that there's been one specific thing. I think so the most popular episode I did was on the shift, was on banning shifts and the rule changes surrounding the shift. That was the most popular episode I had, and the interest in that seemed to be a lot more like hearing each other out of the other positions, much more than other subjects, it felt like, which I was really that was surprising to me, because I feel like that has been a really heated topic of like the old school is like learn how to bunt and learn how to hit the other way and learn like just this kind of aggravated thing of like learn the fundamentals and like it didn't feel like there was a lot of understanding there, whereas like a lot of the new school and analytics was like, come on, you have to correct for how things are shaping up and how things are moving. Like you have to make some sort of, not necessarily a rule even, but just some sort of adjustment. And so having some of the common ground of like of just hearing each other out was really interesting to me. And I actually didn't have a whole lot of say in some of the conversations in some of the rooms that I was in, social media speaking, of that. I didn't really have a whole lot to put into that until I put the show out there with my opinions and whatnot. Of like, it was really cool to just see I wouldn't even call it a banter, just a friendly conversation of these two schools of thought that really, really love the game and actually hearing each other out and being like, oh, the new school understanding like, oh yeah, like there are situations where a bunt would be better. Like, and it does help. And that is paying for it if you overshift and that's a consequence of doing that. And seeing the old school's reaction to something that I put forth in the episode is just changing the verbiage. Like, I think there's an instant recoil. So like Josh Edwards, you said you mentioned the asterisk about talking about like Hall of Fame stuff. Like when you say the word asterisk, there's a visceral response to that, right? Like on whatever side it is, like there is certain terminology that there is just sort of this instant knee-jerk reaction of like, ooh, I don't like that. And so one of the things that was talked about in that is that verbiage of we are banning the shift. And the whole idea of shift bans, and that word ban is the kind of the match that is striking this tension and this debate. And when we started talking about it in the context of, no, this is just basically like in football, like an illegal formation, and kind of start talking like almost softening the wording to a point to where it's like, no, this is actually a really good thing, to where, hey, other sports, there's certain places you can't be at certain times. Basketball has it as well with the 3-second violation, stuff like that, to where, okay, like let's take a step back. We're not banning all shifts. Like, it's not like you can only stay in this little circle of an area. Like, no, there's an illegal formation now to where you cannot have 3 players on one side of the infield. And to me, that softened a lot, and that softened both sides a lot. And that was not necessarily my idea. I'm kind of a grammar nerd as well. And so I kind of threw that out there, like kind of a hand grenade, like, hey, let's throw this out here and see what happens. And everybody kind of latched onto it and had a really friendly conversation, both sides. And that was kind of surprising to me, of like, oh, this is actually a really heated topic that ended up being a lot of fun and really friendly on both sides.
Yeah, that shift episode. I mean, I was already on board with the shift, but you said you started comparing, or you mentioned someone who was in your group who said it's like how the NFL has illegal formations, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, oh, this goes around like the entire sports area, and so that just surprised me, and it added so much to. I mean, that's such a great episode. So I'm not surprised it's your most popular episode. And then in your last I believe it was your last episode, unless you uploaded since then. You talked about a salary floor.
Yeah.
And Edwards and I, we had a brief discussion on this, and I want a salary floor like none other. I think the fact that I think it was the Guardians, the Athletics, and the Pirates didn't have weren't spending more than like $48 million on their entire team.
Yep.
And I think when you talk about like baseball dying, I don't think baseball is dying. I think it's got a resurgence lately that and I think that it's really becoming more popular, but I think something that's hindering it is not all the teams are trying to compete. Mm-hmm. Last year, I mean, the Athletics, they got rid of all their players and insisted on being a completely shitty team. And they really did what they meant to do. I think right now they have the 6th draft pick, which I want to talk about the lottery in a second. So I think they need to be forced to somewhat compete, because the Pirates, they haven't been good in 10 years. And that was and they were good from like 2012 to 2013. And then before that, they hadn't been good since the 90s. So I think they need to be pushed to be better. What are your thoughts like? And I think Edwards, his thoughts are that you need to have a cap in order to have a floor. And so, Brandon, what were you going to say?
Yeah, you kind of already like passed it. I was gonna jump in really quick, but I wouldn't say like you said that baseball is dying. I don't think it's dying. Like the word "dying," I don't think is the right term. It's just reinventing itself.
Mhm.
No, like I said, I don't think it's dying.
Yeah.
I think
no. I was just trying to like that. That's what I
okay.
meant. Like it's not like the term "dying" isn't the right word that should be used. It should be baseball is reinventing itself.
Well, the great thing about baseball is that it's always evolving. It's an evolutionary thing. So
that's how sports should be. But
yeah, that's why it cracks me up when I hear from the old school fans of like, keep things the way they've always been. That doesn't exist. Like,
there's
in anything, it doesn't exist in anything.
Not just baseball, just in life. Like that doesn't exist. It's always evolving. But
there's a podcast that I hate with a fiery passion. I mentioned them a couple times, but I'm not going to mention
the 3 dudes and the squirrel nuts or whatever.
Yeah, the Saggy Nuts podcast. Anyways, they always talk about how baseball is dying because they don't wear, like, I don't know what the crap was their problem, but anyways, they're old people. Anyways, back to my question, Josh Lewis, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the salary for me, the salary floor is the number one change that baseball has to make. As of right now, like the rule changes that they're instituting are pretty cool. Like I'm pretty much for them, but I think the salary floor is the number one thing that they have to change. I do understand where you're coming from, Josh Edwards, in terms of like the salary floor doesn't necessarily work as well if you don't have a salary cap as well. That to me is going to be a lot more difficult to put in because you've got a really strong players association that's going to push back against that. But not that it can't be done. It's just it's going to be difficult. But the I don't want to go so far as like the way the NBA has things structured where you've got you do have a salary cap, but you've also got all these exceptions and kind of different levels that you can put players into and stuff like that. To me, that's a little too compartmentalized. That's a little bit too simplistic, even though that I'm a fan of simplicity. But I kind of like it a little bit more kind of where the NFL is at in terms of a certain percentage of your a certain percentage of your income basically has to be spent on salaries, player salaries specifically. And so just things like that. There's a lot of wrinkles you can get into, but I think the salary floor is the number one thing. Cause I mean, you look at the NFL, like there's good teams and bad teams. Like, don't get me wrong. Like the Houston Texans suck, right? Like there's going to be bad teams. It's going to happen. But you look at the NFL schedule and my sports betting has absolutely sucked this year because you cannot predict the NFL very well this year. Like people will say they can, but they can't. Like there's like I do a pick'em league for the NFL and it's like, it's a crapshoot this year. Like you don't know who's going to win on any given Sunday. And I think that is really, really exciting. Like I love chaos. Yeah. And so I think that would make things a lot more fun, especially for a long season like baseball has, is just the day-to-day would be a lot more fun because you're not going to see the Dodgers just wailing on the Athletics in a 3-game series to where it's like, okay, like the run differential was 30. Like it's just, it's not fun to watch. And so I think it would improve just a lot of different aspects of the game. I do agree that there's a lot of nuance to it again, with that gray area, right? That like Josh Edwards brought up of like the kind of both sides, salary floor, salary cap. Like, what does it look like to have a salary cap? What does it look like to, I think they've tried too hard to make it like with revenue sharing and stuff like that, to where it's like, it's really not like they've kind of taken half-ass steps throughout the last couple decades. And they just really need a salary floor to be like, no, you need to put a competitive team on the field and stop insulting your fans, insulting the game. To me, that's more dangerous to the integrity of the game, quote unquote, that all these old school guys want to talk about than steroids is. Like, at least steroids, everybody could take them. Like, yeah. I mean, there's like it's still an even playing field as opposed to without a salary floor. You don't have Like you could have an owner who's just like, nope, I just want to make my money and this is my shiny new toy. I don't care if we win. I just want to make some money. And they can do that through TV deals and stuff like that, to where it doesn't matter who's showing up at the ballpark. So
Yeah. Edwards, your name was used a lot in this topic. What do you have to say for this?
So, the more I've thought about this, because this is actually something I wanted to talk about in the off season, one of our off season shows. I'm not necessarily as much against the salary floor as I have been in the past. Or if there's going to be a floor, there's got to be a cap. And Lewis made a good point about the strong players union and how it's going to be tough to get a cap in there. But I would say they have to make a severe penalty for a luxury tax for teams that are spending $250 million on their roster. Even if your floor is, let's call it $75 million, there needs to be some way. I mean, okay, let me try to phrase this more clearly because I'm mixing my own words up. If you're going to have a floor, there's going to be teams that are going to do the bare minimum. And if you don't have some kind of a cap or a major luxury tax, there's still going to be owners that go out there and spend and spend and spend and spend, where you're never going to be able to find that happy medium and get more competitiveness or more equal level playing field of competitiveness across the floor. So I don't think a salary floor is going to be enough by itself. You're going to have another side of that somewhere along the way. If it's not a cap, it needs to be a luxury tax. And I hate the NBA. Like, I hate the association. I think it's the worst freaking pro sport in America. I think it's ran like crap. But if you're going to have a floor, you got to have something at the top tier where it discourages owners from going out and putting $300 million a year into their roster.
Yeah.
I mean, part of this also comes down from the revenue that teams make from the ballpark, from beers, from food, from parking, from everything else. I mean, there was a list that came out during the regular season that Logan and I looked at very briefly. I think we talked about it for about 5 minutes about, where the most expensive games were, the top 10 most expensive places to go see a game. And the Cardinals were not on that list. Thank God for me.
Yeah.
Or I thank God for that, because, I mean, if the Cardinals were any more expensive, I couldn't afford to go. I mean, I could go by myself, but I couldn't take my wife. I couldn't take my kids. So
Who needs them?
I need them.
I was going to say that
you will die alone in a grave, lonely, and by yourself, Logan.
Jeez.
We just took a dark turn.
Yeah.
I love
Logan. I haven't got to pick on him in like 5-6 weeks, so I've got a lot of pent up.
It's because nobody's heard from you.
Oh, I've been busy. And I told you I needed off through December. Anyways, so yeah, just for me, there's got to be two sides of it. You can't just go one side. I just don't think it'll work. I think they will subvert the system 100%.
Yeah.
The teams like the Dodgers, like the Mets, like the Phillies look like they're doing right now. They're going out and buying and spending. The freaking Phillies look like the Dodgers right now. The amount of money they've shelled out today for a couple players. I mean, the Phillies are going to make a serious run next year at the World Series. Good for them. Good for the.
They weren't even that good.
And they probably won't win.
And they probably won't, but they're at least their owner's going to make a run at it. The Mets owners came out and said he's going to make a run because his goal is to win a World Series in 5 years of his ownership. He's going into his third season. So I think you're never going to be able to combat that unless you have some kind of penalty at the top. That's the long roundabout way of me getting my point across. If you're going to have one, you got to have the other. If you're not going to have the luxury, you can't have the floor.
Yeah,
and I think
I like that. I like that a lot.
Would be a great idea.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
See, happy median. I like it.
Yeah. That's. I like that. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe because I don't like how the salary cap is worked in the NFL. I'm not a big fan of it being put in the MLB. Brandon, do you have any thoughts on that?
On the salary cap and floor?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I hate salary caps at the same time. But looking at some of the contracts that these guys are getting, I don't understand where they're getting the money from. Like, there's no way all these teams like how San Diego was able to load up and not. I mean, I know they have the luxury thing, which I think is stupid because I don't know of any other sports league that has or sports organization that has a luxury tax like the MLB does. At least that allows teams to go over that cap. Because I know the NHL, once you hit your cap, you're done. Like, that's it. You can't. There's ways you can work around it, like putting on the long-term
LTIR.
IR stuff like that. But you can't work your way around. Once you hit the cap, you're done. I don't know if that needs to come into effect, but I mean, look at how competitive the NHL has become over the last couple of years just because of that salary cap. And I know it's not only that, but it hasn't changed a lot. So I know that has a lot to do with it too. But I think you have to, if you want more competitive teams and not the same teams every single year going out and spending all the money, then yeah, you're going to have to cap it at some point. You have to be like, hey, this is it. You can't spend any more. Doesn't matter. No luxury tax. No. Hey, we're giving you this, but really you're really getting this. Like I know, and it happens all the time. It happens in the NFL. They say they're only signing this amount, but realistically, they're not making anything. They're not making anything off their contracts.
No.
Everything's coming from endorsements. So
yeah.
I don't know. I just think if they do it, they need to cap it. They just need to put a cap on it and just let it be.
Yeah, and earlier, whenever I was saying the people think baseball is dying, I should have said the reason why baseball was why it kind of felt like it was dying was because a lot of things were boring. I think Lewis said, you have the Dodgers and the A's playing each other. No one's going to go to that. No one really cares to see that, especially if you're an A's fan. Dodgers fans are probably going to want to go because it's going to be cheap tickets, and you might see some excitement in the left field bleachers.
I was going to say, and because they're dicks and they're going to try to start fights. But
yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that help. The whole baseball is dying if you put a salary floor and say, listen, you guys have to be more competitive. You can't just sit around for 10 years and do absolutely nothing. And there are teams that need a rebuild. The Rangers.
Rebuild.
Yeah. And right now they're showing that they just signed Jacob deGrom. They just got Andrew Heaney. They really used their time. They said, we're going to take 5 years and we're going to suck, but we're going to do well. We're going to try to compete. Sometimes you need that, but I think there are teams that are just taking advantage of it. And I think it hurts the sport a lot whenever you have 10 teams that are just dog shit.
Yeah.
And so I think that helps.
That's like 3/4 of the NL Central right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I got mad the other day because someone was like, the Cardinals were a 90-win team. How can you say they sucked? I was like, they played the Cubs and the Pirates and the Reds most of the season.
And the Brewers after the All-Star break were just awful.
And I'm too lazy to look this up, but I should. If you look at their record inside the NL Central and outside the NL Central, it's going to be completely different. I don't think they have a winning record against any team outside the NL Central. But anyways, I'm not going on a tangent, I promise. Does anybody else have any questions? Because I have one more question, and I think we're going to wrap it up.
I'm good.
Okay. So they just had the draft lottery today, and I had it pulled up, and then I forgot. And this is another thing that I think is going to help baseball a lot is, you can't just tank anymore. It doesn't actually help you if you tank. Pittsburgh gets the number 1 spot, so I guess tanking does help you. Nationals gets the 2nd spot, Detroit 3rd, Texas 4th, and Minnesota gets a 5th spot, which is weird because they were in the hunt up until the last
They were
month.
decent.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, so they had a huge move up from outside of the lottery to the 5th overall pick. Lewis, what are your thoughts on the draft lottery?
So this is one of those things where I struggle to find my gray area.
Yeah, right.
I hate the baseball draft. I hate everything. I like not only this iteration, just historically, I hate the baseball draft. I think it's way too much of a crapshoot. The way that that baseball is structured, like I am not really a fan of drafting a 17-year-old from the Dominican Republic and all of a sudden throwing them into an American lifestyle. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that I really don't like about the way baseball is structured. And that causes me to not like really the baseball draft at all. However, that being said, this is one of those areas that looks like where baseball is trying to improve, and trying to take a page a little bit out of the NBA, which, like Edward said earlier, is not the best run organization either. But I think there's flaws in every system. But I do appreciate at least. I appreciate progress. I appreciate movement. I appreciate trying to make things better. I mean, we saw that one thing that softened my response is kind of the movement that we've had in terms of treating minor leaguers better and compensation for minor leaguers and stuff like that. And so I think things like that will get me back into the draft a little bit more. And there's just the baseball draft, I feel like more than any other sport, you have no idea until like 6-7 years down the line. Like,
Right.
and I just don't have the patience for that. Like I just don't have the patience to be like, oh yeah, I got really excited that they just drafted Matt Holliday's kid or whatever. Like I can't get excited about that because he might go to single A and suck.
Right.
Like he's still too raw. He's still too young. Like you don't know. Like it's not like the NBA where you can draft a kid, whether he's 18, 19, and they're in the league either right away or within a year or two. Like it's just same thing with football. I mean, football is different because of the physical demand. Like you're not going to draft a high schooler, obviously, but they're like you draft players that are going to play right away. Like I love the NFL draft. The NFL draft to me is a blast because those players are going to make an immediate impact or soon are going to make an impact within a year or two.
Right.
It's still a crapshoot. Like every draft is a crapshoot. Like you don't know what's going to happen, but baseball is even more so than others. And so I just don't enjoy it that much. And so for the most part, I ignore it. I did pay attention a little bit more this year, just in terms of the context and the historical context of it, in terms of like, yeah, you can't just tank anymore. I mean, you can, but you can't. Like it's kind of like the NBA. Like you can, but you can't.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of the same sort of thing. And
Doesn't
so
necessarily help you.
yeah, it doesn't necessarily help you. And so like I said, I'm a fan of progress. I'm a fan of moving, trying to better things. And so hopefully that'll soften my position on the draft. But yeah, from the get-go, I'm a hater on on the draft.
Brandon, what do you think about it?
I mean, I love the draft lotteries. I think it adds a little bit of excitement because, like you said, you don't get those teams that are gonna tank. I don't know how many teams are involved in it. Because I know the NBA, is it the NBA? So it has like 12 teams that's involved in the draft or in the draft lottery, which I think is too many, to be honest. If you're going to do it, it's just like the, worst 5 teams below. If you're going to do any kind of draft lottery. But, and again, you kind of look at it, the NHL has been doing the draft lottery the longest. In Edmonton, who got, I don't know how many first round picks back to back to back, won a few of the seasons. I'm pretty sure they purposely did it. But it didn't really, I mean, yeah, they got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but look at their team now. I mean, that's literally all they have. They don't have anybody else besides that. So there's times where the draft lotteries can hurt. Because when you get that first overall pick, you already expected to pick this person. If you don't pick this person, well, you're stupid. It's you're not making the right choice or this and that. I think that goes throughout all of any drafts, professional sports wise. Like if you don't draft this person, you're going to be criticized as a ownership and GM and everything else that you didn't pick the right guy. So I don't know. I like draft lotteries. I think they add a little bit of excitement, but overall, as a big picture, they don't really do much.
Yeah. Quick thing. Every team that missed out on the playoffs is eligible for the lottery. So 18 teams for 6 spots.
Yeah.
Top 6 spots, really. That's surprising.
And how did they go the order after the 6?
I guess just by who had the worst record up.
Yeah.
Josh Edwards, you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't have any major qualms with it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's just part of it. I mean, I'd have to agree with Lewis on the NFL draft is probably the most fun because that's actually something I'll go watch the first 2 rounds. And because the guys, okay, so in the NFL draft, we all know this. The guys you get in the first, second, third round are guys who can make an instant impact. For your guys that are 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounders, your development players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we all knew that.
Well, I know we all knew that. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. So,
in baseball, you rarely get that first round pick who makes an impact inside of his first 2 seasons, unless it's don't cream your pants, Logan, a Juan Soto or a Bryce Harper, or, generational talents. Those are so few, and rare, which obviously is why we call them generational talents. But I mean, yeah, could they find a way to make it more exciting? Yes, but the gap between an 18-year-old or even a 20-year-old coming out of second year of college, or an 18-year-old senior out of high school going to the MLB, and a developed 23, 24-year-old MLB player, it's just so drastic. You're rarely ever gonna see instant impact, and I think that's just the game of baseball. I think that's because of the skill set and the honing of your skills that baseball takes. Whereas football, it's like Josh said earlier, it's strength, physicality, physical development that allows you to make an instant impact or come into the league and play right away. Or basketball, where there is no physicality because it's the worst sport ever. The NBA is at least today's NBA.
Hey, Josh, do you like the NBA?
Yeah, right.
I liked the NBA in the 90s, in the 80s, in the very early 2000s. I loved it.
Yeah, something just threw me off a little bit that you don't like it.
The LeBron era, I just hate the LeBron era. Flopping this is the reason I don't like soccer. I don't like flopping.
Every sport has it.
Soccer players are the only athletes in the world that are worse than basketball players.
Okay,
so that's kind of where I stand with it. It comes about just straight logic of development and where they can make an impact. That's why I like hockey. I mean, you see more and more, we're seeing more 19 and 20-year-olds who get drafted, go play in the minors for 1 year, and then they're in the NHL and they're making a difference. Trevor Zegras for Anaheim. Robert Thomas did it for the Blues in 18 or 19. Kyrou came up and played a little bit for the Blues. So I like these young kids in hockey that can come up and still play because they may not have the physical abilities like size and strength yet, but they have the skill set to where they can play a different side of the game. Baseball is just never going to have that. I think it's something that this is why the draft doesn't matter to me. It's baseball has a certain skill set that you have to hone to be able to play with the big boys. And when you're that young, you just don't have that full skill set and the physical maturity is not there yet. So that's why I really don't have a take on the baseball draft because it is a crapshoot and it is what it is. It's never going to change.
Yeah. Okay, so one last question before we head out. Josh, this is going to be a new question you never heard before. If you were GM or king of baseball for a day, what would you change? I think that's how the question goes, right?
Yeah, yeah, because you can't say commissioner of baseball because he can't act unilaterally. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like that king of baseball. I like that a lot. I don't know. There's so many different ways you can go about it, but for me, it's simplification of the front office structure. And what I mean by that is there are so many more elements to building a roster in baseball than there are in any other sport. And some of it is ridiculous. I mean, you've got the Rule 5 draft, you've got options for sending guys up and sending down, and like there's so many elements of roster construction that make it too complicated, and that, I mean, we saw it with Chris Bryant not too long ago, that screw over guys that deserve to be on a major league roster, stuff like that. And so I feel like there's just too many wrinkles, and so I don't know. I haven't worked it out all in my mind, but if I were king for a day, it'd be simplifying kind of all the ancillary minutia of roster construction, make things simpler, whether that's the cap and the cap and floor, whether it's doing away with some of the things that have been around a while, like the Rule 5 draft or draft compensation for free agents or whatever. Like there's just too many steps, too many levels. I would bring down the minor leagues in terms of how many teams there are. That issue has already started. Things of that nature. And so to me, it would be just to simplify roster construction. And I know that the guys making millions of dollars as GMs and stuff like that wouldn't like that. But I think for the sport as a whole, it would simplify things. I mean, and simplifying the rules, like we talked about, like drafting these 17-year-old guys, like baseball is one of those things where you have to hone for longer. So let's just do away with some of the minor league systems and encourage these kids to keep playing, whether it's semi-pro ball or college or overseas or whatever, to develop those skills more and whatnot. I don't know. There's a lot of open gray area within that. But to me, if I was king for a day, it'd be to sit some people down and be like, okay, like let's simplify roster construction and do away with all this front office bull that we've got going on.
I'd vote for that. I guess my vote wouldn't count, but still, especially if you're a king, but still, I'd vote for that. Anyways, any other questions before we go?
Can I answer this question?
Oh yeah, you can answer it.
I'd make two major changes. Not major, but two changes. First one would be we get rid of the Buster Posey rule. It'd be gone, abolished, done forever.
I don't want to see anybody break their leg anymore, though.
If you're not man
kind of
enough
missed the
to
Joe
play a
Theismann
sport with some
injuries.
contact, you shouldn't play. And I would get rid of the DH and the NL.
That was so much fun, though.
No, you would not. You love the DH.
I like the strategy of the double switch.
I do enjoy that strategy. So my question to that, we don't have to get too far into it, but my question to that is why do you have two separate sets of rules in one major league?
Because I like the difference of the two different leagues. I like the leagues having, they're not conferences. If it's going to be the exact same, make it the National Conference and the American Conference, or whatever, or make it the East and the West, the North and the South, which you can't do in baseball.
We don't do North.
I don't like calling them different leagues without having a little bit of different rules. I don't know. I loved the difference of when the AL teams would go to an NL park, the pitchers had to hit. I liked when the NL teams went to the AL parks and the pitchers got a day off. I love the strategy of the double switch. I just liked those things. And it's because, as much as Logan knows it, I'm a traditionalist. And that's one of those traditional rules that I really, really like. Like, I'm all for getting rid of the shift. I'm for the pitch clock. I don't know how I feel about the bigger bases yet. We'll see. I'm keeping an open mind on that, because if that causes more steals and brings back running in baseball, I'll be all for it.
I don't think it's going to cause much difference at all.
Well,
it'll cause. I mean, it's 6 inches difference. And listen,
but
it's a whole 6-inch whole base. Yeah,
but it's just about the tag, it's going to make catchers important again. It's going to be more than just sitting back there and calling a game. You're going to have to be able to pop, throw, gun a guy down. if that rule makes that kind of a change, I'm going to be all for it. So there are things that I like in the new school, but there are things that to me are inherent to baseball traditionally that should have stuck around. The DH has been fun, but I miss the strategy of the game where the NL didn't have a DH.
I agree with everything you said. I still like the universal DH.
I like the DH.
I'm glad, and I appreciate the fact you at least agree with my argument.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything, and that was a place where I had to adjust a little because I agree 100% with everything you just said. I still think at the end of the day, my logical brain kicks in and is like nope, I like the universal DH. So that's one of those gray areas where I'm torn, but yeah, I'm at the end of the day, I'm for it. But.
My dad is as traditional as it comes. I try to show him on base percentage, and he's like, "What's his batting average? Just help me out here." And I'm like, "I would refuse to tell you." He hated the DH idea, and now he loves the DH. I mean, I think it helps. I think it helps. You know, having an empty bat in a lineup is not good for the game.
Right.
When you have an easy out like the pitcher, that doesn't help anything at all.
Yep.
Hold on.
It's like
But
having the
pitchers
quarterback
used to be
play
able to hit.
cornerback.
Used to.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. The game, we need to get back to the traditional part of the game where you're a baseball player. You should be able to hit the ball.
It's hard
That's
to do
what I
that.
don't like.
It's hard to do that.
It's
You're a
the
baseball
same
player.
thing
Either
with the
get
shot.
hit by the pitch,
I don't-
walk or hit the ball.
I don't think it has anything to do with the pitchers not being able to hit. I don't want my pitcher going out and getting beamed.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Also,
That's part of the game.
if I lose my pitcher and he's out, he breaks his arm or something like that, or breaks his fingers, I'm gonna be livid because he got beamed by somebody who's not happy because the guy before him.
Yeah.
So guess what?
Hit
Then
one
your
dead
relief
center.
pitcher who takes his spot gets to go in and take the head off. So, well, not
No,
the
but
head,
if I miss
but
the
gets to take
playoffs
somebody
and
down.
lose a chance at winning the World Series,
That's part of sports.
No.
That is part of sports.
Brandon, what if you were king for a day? Notice how
First thing I'm doing is putting a damn team in Nashville.
There you go.
Honestly,
I like it.
Yeah,
expand. Yeah, we need to have expansion.
putting a team in Nashville, and I'm somehow putting one in Vegas.
I think Josh Edwards and I talked about this. Like, if we did an expansion team, we would have to do an international draft first, right? Which I think
I think so.
I think they've gone back and forth. Like, I feel like they've said that there is an international draft coming, and then they said no, it's not coming, and then they said it is coming, and then they said it's not coming. I don't know if it's official yet, but I feel like you need to have an international draft first, just so that way you can expand who you get. But yeah, I definitely would like more teams. Nashville definitely needs one. I'm sure Texas needs another one somewhere.
No, they don't.
Give Montreal
California
a
doesn't
team
need
back.
another one.
They don't.
No.
Oh yeah, not Montreal. Yeah, Montreal needs. I think Canada needs at least two.
I don't think they're gonna put in another one in Montreal. I don't see them doing that.
Should.
Seems like they all would miss that. Anyways, if I was king for the day,
Nobody
I would-
cares what you think, Logan.
you're right.
Wow.
Okay, Josh Lewis is from the Caught in the Pickle podcast. It's a great podcast. If you haven't heard about it, you need to watch it. It's a great podcast. Second best podcast on baseball. That's not ours. Edwards, how are you doing? Do you have any words of wisdom before we go?
Enjoy the holiday season. Live every day like you won't get another.
Wow.
Deep.
Wow.
Brandon.
As Logan's just back with the cigarette in his mouth. No, I don't have anything. Appreciate you coming on, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
was
Josh
a
Lewis,
pleasure.
you want to plug some stuff for you?
New episode drops tomorrow about this. This might make Josh Edwards' toes curl. Sorry, it doesn't drop tomorrow. Drops on Friday. About what baseball can learn from the World Cup and from soccer.
Oh, round robin play.
We'll see.
Oh.
Actually, I'd be okay with that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Be sure to
Relegation.
Hmm?
Relegation.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
said relegation.
We
Hold on,
like
hold on.
relegation.
Time out. Have you ever heard my theory on the umpires?
Oh gosh.
Mm.
Okay, so I am totally against robot umpiring. We can debate that another time. But I think there should be a relegation system for the umpires. The umpires that call really, really bad games or can't hit like
Agreed.
Oh,
a
I think we all
94%
agree with that.
minimum,
Yeah.
then they should be relegated to the minors and bring up the good minor league umps.
It
Yeah.
won't happen, but yeah, I would like to have.
I agree. I think that should happen. That should happen across any sport, any professional sports.
No, look at that. I got some agreement.
Yeah.
Shocked.
Hey now.
I agree with it. I just know
Yeah.
it won't happen. That's why they need to do the automatic umps. Anyways, Josh, Lewis, thanks for coming on. Seriously, go on Spotify, go on his Facebook page, Caught in a Pickle Facebook group. It's a great group where everyone is pretty decent.
Mhm.
And except whenever
I've only had to kick out one guy so far. So
you got to keep those guys. Those guys are the greatest.
That's some
Anyways.
spice.
People out.
Some spice.
Anyways, everyone, thanks for joining. We'll be back on Thursday to recap the winter meetings. So keep an eye out on that. And yeah, live long, watch some damn baseball. And
Yada
Oh,
yada yada
by
yada.
the way, if I was king for a day, I would make I would try to have like a more whatever. I don't care. It's too much explanation. I don't care. Peace out, motherfucker.